Hi, I'm Thom Tschetter, and welcome to this session of VTS powered by ATRA. Today we're going to talk about turning outside sales inside out. And it's a new generation approach to outside sales and marketing that will be a 4-part series. And the first one we're going to talk about today is why outside sales. Now, this to me is a metaphor for what outside sales is. This is a cutaway of a shell, as you probably can tell, but it's a pattern that repeats itself in nature. And there was a mathematician back around the Renaissance that came up with a mathematical progression that is contained within this structure, and it's called a Fibonacci pattern. And I'm going to go a little bit into more on the Fibonacci later, but the reason I call this I think this is a perfect metaphor, is because it starts in the middle with just a dot and it progressively grows out. And that's the way in a traditional outside sales program, that's the way your sales will grow, progressively getting larger. So we're going to be bringing that up a little later, but I just wanted to give you sort of a teaser as a beginning. So one question you might ask is, well, why listen to Thom? You know, I've read his articles in Gears, but I mean, what does he know about outside sales? Well, the truth is, not everybody knows this, but I did outside sales for 25 years. I had my own chain of transmission shops up in Washington State. We started with just a remanufacturing center, and we grew it ultimately. At one point, there were 17 retail locations, and we serviced all of those locations out of that one point. I did all of the outside sales initially for our company, and I continued to do it for the entire 25 years. And I persevered through mistakes, one mistake after another in the beginning. We had some success, obviously we grew, but in spite of myself, you might say, we had those successes. It was a guy by the name of Terry Greenhut that turned me into an outside sales pro. Many of you may know who Terry is. He's been in the business forever, and he's one of those pioneers. I used to think of Terry as the guy that did all the hard work. He came through and he broke up all the rocky soil for those of us in the business that were set in our ways. And the guys like me and Bob Cooper and Mike Lee kind of followed behind in the soil he had already tilled up. So we had an easier job of it than Terry. But I want to give Terry a definite shout out, because I attribute whatever success I've enjoyed in outside sales to Terry's teaching. Now, we've always had a robust outside sales program in my business. We started with it, in fact. In the beginning, it was just me and a rebuilder. And I would go out on the road and sell, and then he would rebuild the units. And we never installed. All we did was over-the-counter sales. And frankly, we realized outside sales was essential, because how do you advertise through general mass media to reach other shops? Our target market was other transmission shops, dealerships, general repair shops. And so it had to be face-to-face. And for about 30 days before we even opened our doors, I was out on the road trying to get pre-orders. And I had some lessons I learned, and I'm going to share those lessons with you as we go through this. We did find out over time, though, that outside sales became the most predictable component of our marketing in general. It was the most consistent. It was almost like we could control the ebb and flow of our leads by how we cranked up or would back off of outside sales. And so I would encourage all of you to take a serious look about what outside sales could do for your business. By the way, over that time, as we grew and had more and more locations, I couldn't cover the whole territory. So I recruited and trained outside sales reps as well. And also, since I more or less retired from that, I did that for 25 years. And in 2005, moved to Arizona, and I started working more as a consultant in the industry. And I have helped set up outside sales programs for different companies throughout the country. In the 25 years, you might think I learned a lot, but the funny thing is, the crazy thing is, here's what I learned. There's no such thing as a crazy idea. Some work, some won't, some don't, and so what? Next. We'll just move on to the next one. The people you're calling on don't know what you were doing yesterday. So you had a crazy idea yesterday and you tried it out, it didn't work, so what? Move on, try something else the next day. Have fun with it. The point here, though, is choose just one of the ideas we're going to talk about today, or actually in the next 4 sessions, and do it. Just pick one and do it. And then pick another one. Go back and keep revisiting them and do them. And you'll find that you'll get some great ideas. But better yet, you'll come up with some ideas of your own. And those are the best because you really buy into those. You want to be open to something new and different. Now we're talking about you. What do you do to prepare for outside sales? You can begin by turning your own attitude inside out. Some of you have a mindset that you can't do it. There's an expression that says success comes in cans, not in cannots. The interesting thing is, the guy that said that, you probably never heard of, Joel Weldon. I had never heard of him either. I had to look it up. But he built a career. He was floundering as a motivational business speaker, and then one day he was driving to the next speech, and he had this thought: success comes in cans, not in cannots. He immediately pulled over, went into a supermarket, and bought a bunch of little cans of tomato sauce, those little cans, and he went out and he made some labels up and wrote success on them. And that ultimately became his business card, his calling card. Success comes in cans, not in cannots, and he'd give out cans. So you never know where your next crazy idea is going to come from, but that actually turned his career around. Now finish this sentence. Sales are down because. Take a minute, think about it. Think about how you would finish that sentence. Sales are down because. Now, some of you may not have sales down right now, but you'd like them to be better. But in any event, finish the sentence, sales are down or aren't as high as they could be because. Now, I'm going to speculate now that some of those reasons might be people are buying new cars. Frankly, the new cars have so many new whistles and bells on them, people are buying new cars. New car sales are sizzling, but what do they do with the old ones? Transmissions are lasting longer might be another reason some of you are throwing out. Well, you know what? Get over that. So they're lasting longer. There's way more cars on the road. Some are breaking. How do we get them? People aren't spending money on their old cars. Well, baloney. They aren't spending, but someone has to fix it. So people in general, we're not talking about the owners of the cars. The owners may not spend the money on the old car, but people are, because people buy repairs. Someone's going to fix that car. General repair shops are installing remans. Boy, that's a definite get over it. That's been happening for years. They weren't necessarily installing remans back in the day. They were buying wrecking yard units and putting them in. They have always had alternatives. They may have even been sending them up to one of your competitors' shops and you didn't even realize it. General repair shops see more people than transmission shops, and they're going to come across more transmission work, frankly, than a transmission shop will in the course of a week. How do we get them to send that work to us? That's what outside sales is about. So you want to get over these, whatever these obstacles are that you're throwing out. They're false. They're myths. Just buy into that. Just, do me a favor right now and just put those aside if those are roadblocks for you. Give outside sales a try. If I had $1 for every time I've heard somebody say, if I just had one more major job a week, my life would be great. If I just had one more major job a week, we would be, instead of in the red, we'd be in the black. Or I could set money aside for my next vacation. Or I could hire another employee if I just had one more job a week. Well, how do you get one new account per month for 12 months? If you could do that, let me show you what'll happen. I'm talking minimums here now. If you had outside sales, could you get one new account per month for 12 months? One job comes from each of those accounts every 2 months. So what we're asking for is one new account a month that sends us a job every other month. Pretty minimal. We'll say the average job's $2,000. You might say, well, that's pretty high. Well, it's not really, because nearly all the jobs that they're going to send you will be major jobs. So you're not going to have minor jobs dragging down that average. So an average of $2,000 is probably, again, minimal by today's standards. That would be 12 sales over the first 1 to 6 months. If the first 6 accounts you got, each sent one every other month, that would equal $24,000. Now, in the next 6 months, because the first 6 are still sending, now your new 6 are sending, now you're up to $60,000. That's 30 sales in your first 12 months of doing outside sales, with the target being just 1 new account per month. What does that mean? Well, in the first 12 months, you'd have 42 sales for a total of $84,000. That's not too shabby, but it's still not 1 a week, which was what our goal was, if I could have 1 more major a week. But remember, we accumulated that over the first year. Now, what does that mean for year 2? For year 2, if you didn't get any new accounts, but you kept the original 12, they would produce 72 jobs for you, and they'll do that every year from then on. That's 1.4 jobs a week. At $2,000 is $144,000 in annual sales. Now, you've done that with a minimal of effort. I can't imagine you can't go get 1 account a month. Now, remember I mentioned Fibonacci earlier? And I mentioned there was a Fibonacci progression. That was the thing with the shell that I put up in the beginning. This is called the Fibonacci sequence, and I think it replicates in outside sales. Some people like to use the word exponential. Exponential is this squared by this squared by this squared. This isn't exponential, nor will your outside sales program be exponential, but it'll grow gradually. So in the Fibonacci sequence, you start with 0, 1 are your first 2 numbers. And if you've ever taken one of those tests back when you were testing for an aptitude test or something, they give you these sequences of numbers, and it might say, finish this sequence, 1, 3, 5, 7, what's the next number? Well, 9, because obviously the sequence is for odd numbers. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, same thing. Okay, the Fibonacci was the one that would mess people up, because what it actually is it's the first 2 numbers added together with the next 2 numbers added together. So the sequence in this case goes 0, 1 would be 1. Now 1 and 1 is 2. 1 and 2 is 3. Then 5, then 8, then 13, 21, 34, 55, 89. And here's what's interesting, and I don't think this is a coincidence. The Fibonacci for the number 12, space number 12, is 144. And isn't it funny, 144,000 turned out to be our annual sales number. So honestly, the point of it that I'm making is it's an ever-growing, ever-expanding market, and those are minimal numbers. So we need to talk about what is outside sales. You know, there's outside sales, there's inside sales. Well, what's the difference? Well, there's always more business outside of your shop than there is inside. Remember I said the general repair shops see more transmissions or potential transmission work than you'll see in a week? That's true, but that's not inside your shop. That's somewhere else. How do we get that? Outside sale is any sale that results from a direct contact that occurs outside of the walls of your shop. The key word here is direct, a direct contact, an intentional contact, okay? That would include outbound sales of any kind. You might say, well, any kind? Yeah, even telephone. You could even have a telephone boiler room that's making outgoing calls. Face-to-face calls, I think, are the best. Cold calls, callbacks, appointments, however you want to approach it. Direct mail and letters and cards are a lost art. I'm not talking about something mass printed. I'm talking about writing out a card to somebody, but you got to ask for their business. Community activities, joining service clubs and networking. We're going to talk about ways to do that in a minute, but don't just join them, be active in them. Word of mouth's technically outside sales. It's just you're not the one doing it, it's your customers that are doing it. But teach them how to be outside sales. I'm going to show you some ways to do that in session 4. The social media is our new word of mouth. In fact, it's immediate, it's instant. And some mass media advertising is outside sales as well, and I'll give you some examples of that a little later. You might say it could be the lazy man's outside sales. Now, you need to develop a philosophy about selling in general, but outside sales. And I like what Zig Ziglar said. He was always one of my favorite motivational speakers. And he says, you can get anything you want in life by helping other people get what they want in life. Help enough other people and you're going to be successful. So outside sales for me, and hopefully for you by the end of these 4 sessions, is just that simple. Find out what they need or what they want and help them get it. It's that simple. You can do it through conversations, presentations, any number of the ways I'm going to show you. So I want to differentiate between what I call traditional outside sales and new generation outside sales, although we're not going to get into either of them until later. I just want to differentiate them for the moment. So in order to do that, we need to look at where we've been so we can understand where we're going. And the key here is that transmission shops used outside sales to get a steady flow of repeat business. That was traditionally how the shops that did it used it. Now, it would normally be a B2B relationship. It'd be a B2B relationship with some types of businesses I'm going to bring up in a moment. And the goal is multiple repeat purchases over time. So what are the types? The basic types of the traditional accounts were referral accounts. These were shops that didn't do transmission work, but they trusted you enough with their customers to send the work to you. Then there's sublet or outsource accounts, and these are shops that don't necessarily send the customer to you, they'll just send the vehicle to you, and then you'll do the job, bill them, and they'll mark it up to their customer. And then there's installer shops. Installer shops will buy the unit and install it themselves so they can make the profit on the unit and also on the labor for installing it. And some of them might even buy a unit from you and resell it to someone else. Fleets are another source, and these are companies that send you their vehicles. Traditionally, they would send it to you to maintain the vehicle. It'd be more of a general repair shop type of relationship where you're maintaining the vehicle and doing repairs as they become necessary. But if their vendor that's doing that doesn't do transmissions, well, you can work your way in with transmissions. Motor pools, these are fleets that have their own repair shops, but they don't generally do transmissions, so they're going to buy a unit somewhere, and you could be the one to sell them the unit. The traditional targets include some of these. I'm not going to go down the whole list because they're pretty obvious. The programs themselves, how we would reach them, again, traditionally, or what I kind of call Me Too programs. These are where everyone kind of copies one another. So one would be that you would ask a shop to refer business to you, and then you give them some sort of a financial incentive. Call it a commission, a finder's fee, a referral fee. Different people feel different about that. Some don't like the practice, others thrive on it. It's a matter of what you like there. I don't come down on either camp on that. But referrals based on reciprocity and friendship are the ones that more organically grow over time. And so you're reciprocating, you're sending general repair work to a general repair shop up the street, he sends you his transmission work, that kind of a relationship. Then there's discounts that you get for sublets, resellers, and fleets. The truth of the matter, though, is most shops don't have any kind of formal outside sales program. The relationships have formed organically, you might say by accident. And they think of this as being outside sales. I've worked with hundreds of shops over the years, and almost everyone I talked to said, oh yeah, outside sales, yeah, we do that. And almost every one of them just have one of these organic relationships with a handful of shops that they've grown to know over the years, and they get along with them and they reciprocate with one another. And they call that outside sales. It is, but it wasn't something done on purpose. In new generation thinking, I'm going to encourage you to expand your vision. to see new possibilities for what's out there. There's hundreds of traditional B2B targets. I only listed about 7 or 8 a minute ago, but you can find new ways to reach those 7 or 8, but you can also discover new targets that aren't even on the radar. They're out there. Now, if you're not convinced yet, here's 4 more reasons why you should have a formal outside sales program. First reason is they work. According to the ATRA surveys, shops with formal outside sales programs have the highest success metric of all the others when they're compared. One shop I know of has an outside sales program that generates an average of 10 major jobs per week for the shop. That's on top of everything else they're doing. 10 major jobs sourced specifically to outside sales. And the other coincidental and interesting thing about the shop is they have a $2,000 a month donut budget. So I don't know about you, but I'd happily trade $2,000 worth of donuts for 40 major jobs a month. I think that's a good trade. Inside-out sales systems need to be complementary. What do I mean by inside-out? What I mean is your inside sales system or procedures or process, whatever you want to call it, a cycle, needs to be complement the outside sales system so that the outside sales knows what inside sales is doing and inside sales knows what the outside salespeople are promising. They need to be the ones fulfilling the promise, right? So we're going to talk about how to make sure that's happening. An interesting thing, though, is that shops that only do outside sales sporadically or only do it in slow times actually scored lower on the ATRA survey than the shops that had no outside sales program at all. Think about that. Doing it half-assed gets you worse results than not doing it at all. The reason I think that occurs is the inconsistency and lack of the coordination between that inside sales program with the outside sales system. That coordination is absolutely essential, or the outside salesperson is making promises that don't get fulfilled. The second reason outside sales is that outside sales are profitable. So we know they work, but are they profitable? Well, wait a minute. How can it be profitable if I have to give discounts and commissions and rebates and expenses and buy donuts and pay someone to be out there doing it? How can that be profitable? Well, the point is, not all of the outside sales programs that you will be using add any expenses. I'm going to show you some ideas that'll cost you absolutely nothing. Those generally don't work as well, but they work. And so what? They work. But the reasons are that outside sales programs do produce the highest average repair orders. Nearly 100% of the jobs that you'll get from outside sales will be major jobs. There's more repeat business from the multiple sources you're calling on. So you've got highest average repair order and repeat business. If you're a transmission-only shop, you're not used to getting repeat business. Some consumers will only deal with you one time in their entire life. So repeat business isn't something we talk about a lot in a transmission shop. But if you have outside sales, you do talk about it and you do get it. You'll have fewer sales peaks and valleys. Again, like I said, you can almost control the flow with your outside sales program. And you'll have steady sales growth. Again, metaphorically referring to the Fibonacci pattern, where you have consistent, continuing, inside-out growth. The third reason is outside sales have the highest marketing return on investment, or ROI. Now that's per lead sold. I'm not talking about necessarily other types of ratios, but it's the highest return on investment per sold lead. Many shops derive over 50% of their sales from a formal direct sales program. A few that come to mind are Jasper, Certified, and ETE. They rely 100% on outside sales. If they can do that nationally, I would certainly think you could do it locally. Don't you think so? The fourth reason is they're highly flexible. outside sales programs are absolutely compatible with any other marketing you're doing. Absolutely compatible. Multifaceted outside sales programs can reduce or even eliminate traditional advertising. Imagine that. You say, well, I can't afford it. I don't want to add additional marketing expenses. Well, how about if you eliminate what you're spending on advertising and channel that into an outside sales program that gets you instant, memorable, or measurable results? It's easy to track those results too, because your lead sourcing is almost automatic. People tell you where they came from. Plus, top of mind awareness is what you're trying to achieve with any type of advertising or marketing you do. What could give you better top of mind awareness than having had a face-to-face contact with somebody and given them a box of donuts? They're going to remember you. There's a company called Enterprise Rent-A-Car. You've all probably had them call on you from time to time. You'd notice they always came in, they presented themselves well, they were professionally dressed, and they always brought donuts. This is a company that started with a little local operation and is now international and one of the largest privately held companies in the world. And they did it with donuts. It's no longer just for the transmission-only shops either. If you're a transmission-only or a transmission shop that's now doing general repairs and you think that disqualifies me from outside sales, you're wrong. The new generation's ideas will work for general repair shops. In fact, I've even worked with a couple of general repair shops that don't even do transmissions and help them install outside sales programs. Still not convinced? Well, if you're not convinced yet, sorry to say, maybe it isn't for you. Maybe it isn't for your shop. But most shops don't do it. So don't feel bad. Just go with those guys. But if you're ready to take the next step, go to part 2 of this presentation and we'll get into and unpack the essentials of successful sales and marketing.